The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and let me see. A couple of house cleaning things we have to get done here. First, we have two brand new networks that are starting here on our channels. So we have the Medical Research Broadcast Network, as well as the People's Radio TV Broadcast Network, and we'll have more information at the release of those dates later on this month, but we're really excited about that. Getting the ball rolling in two other directions. X Zone Nation, my guest this hour is the couple whisperer, and we're talking about Chris Shaver. He is a couples whisperer and a certified Birkman consultant. He's on a mission to help save 85 million couples from divorce or painful breakups. He helps couples navigate the behavioral relationship needs that tear marriages apart. Chris is the author of the upcoming book, Marriage Cure, The Proven Way to Restore Your Love. The couple whisperer. Welcome to the X Zone, Chris. Chris, are you there? We can't hear you, Chris. Chris, I don't know what's going on. Just can't hear you, Chris. Is your audio working? Can you hear us? Okay, but we can't hear you over here. What we'll do is we're going to take a little bit of a break, and hopefully Chris is going to be able to figure out what to do. As I said, he is the couples whisperer, a certified board Birkman consultant. And the couple whisperer, maybe he's whispering to us. No, that's why we can't hear him.
Testing.
Oh, there you go, Chris. We're starting to hear you over here.
Okay, that's good. You're good? You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can you
cool.
hear us?
I can hear you, yeah. It's every one of these video programs seems to pick up a different mic setting on mine.
Well, you're here. That's the main thing, Chris.
There we go. Thank you, Rob. Sorry for the technical issue there.
No problem, my friend. No problem at all. So tell us, how did you get the nickname, the couple whisperer?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I'm a certified Birkman consultant, and Birkman is a motivational personality assessment that is profoundly accurate. And I use that to help couples in marriage settings. And usually what couples say, or individuals or couples after they take that assessment, is it's like somebody was listening to my thoughts, and you've captured things about me that I've never said to anybody else on earth, and never said out loud, really. That's just been in my head. And so being able to do that between two people, I'm not the whisperer, I'm not that smart, but the Birkman assessment, which is based on empirical research, is profoundly accurate, and it really helps people connect and get real and instantly. So that metaphor of somebody who can see something, the horse whisperer who sees a horse looking sideways or something, but that's really what I do, and it's profoundly accurate, and it helps me get immediately into the kinds of issues that can tear marriages apart.
Why did you want to become a marriage consultant?
I don't think I ever woke up one day and said that's really what I want to be, but I actually I was happily married for 27 years, and I went through a job loss, and as a result of that, it's kind of a big upset for my wife. She ended up having a profound physical and mental health breakdown, and we were happily married for 27 years. And then coming out of that, everything just kind of broke apart, and we went from we had one loud fight in our first 27 years of marriage, and we went from after the mental and physical health breakdown, we became the argument couple. We could argue literally at the drop of a pin. And it was 10 years of solid, straight, like bad fighting. And I was standing in the kitchen one day. She'd walk through the door, come back from shopping, and literally 10 seconds, we're in this blowout fight. And I'm standing there, my gums are flopping. I'm just arguing like an idiot. I know I sound like an idiot. I can't help it. She's not stopping. And I just had this, what I call a moment of grace, but she's still yelling at me, and my brain just puts on pause. I get very still, and I see kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not really video, but I saw the kind of slideshow of the behaviors, and they were very subtle behaviors that she communicated to me, her disdain. It was like a quick turn of the shoulders, tone of voice, abruptness in her delivery, but it was all these things. And when I saw them, it was like, it's behavior. It was a big kind of dawning moment on me, and gigantic blind spot. And in that moment, I just said, I can't fight with you anymore. I've seen the things that have been triggering me for 10 years that I couldn't see. I know it's behavior. Prior to that point, I'd read literally 100 books on marriage counseling, couples. I read college textbooks used to train marriage counselors. And I just knew at that point that it wasn't anything I'd ever read in the book. I couldn't find it, but I saw it was behavior. And one thing led to another, and I was introduced to the Birkman method, and I took the assessment, and within seconds, I saw spelled out everything that I had been looking for 10 years about the kind of behavioral issues that can come between people. The story gets pretty interesting because the very first, I changed my career at that moment to become a certified Birkman consultant. I didn't know what that was. I just knew I was looking at something that was profound in its ability to tell you why you do what you do as a human being. Within 6 months, I became a Birkman consultant. And the very first married couple I ever worked with was a marriage counselor and his wife. They had been married 30 years, fighting for 20 years, and marriage counseling for 20 years. And
so wait a minute, this guy was a marriage counselor himself?
Yeah, it was a strange story how they came to be my client, how they came to me. At that point, I already had a business client, a company that I still work with. But I had a business client, and he just called me and he said, I have these people. I think they'd be really interested in what you do. Would you mind giving them a pair of Birkman assessments and just chat with them? And I knew nothing more about them, but it was just like this Saturday in October, I got on the phone with them. And the second I started talking to these two, I knew they weren't tire kickers. They weren't just generally interested in anything. At that point, I'd already been doing conflict remediation in business using Birkman. And, you get in a room with two people who are in conflict, they're pretty tense and pretty, terse and closed down. And that's what was on the phone with me that day. So I just went from giving them kind of a general, here's what Birkman can tell you sort of thing, to Birkman can predict conflict with an extremely high degree of accuracy. It can tell you why you will fight and why you'll fall out and what your behavior will morph into when you're fighting. So I said, here are the triggers. There's some very subtle triggers here that most people would never pick up, and I pointed them out, and I just dove in and I took them through it. Birkman also gives prescriptive behaviors that you can use to prevent or pull yourself back out of conflict. I dove into that, and this was a 2-hour session, and I at that point I still didn't know anything about them, but at the end of it, they're just very quiet the whole time I'm going through this. And at the end I said, gosh guys, you're really quiet, what do you think? And that's when I heard the husband said, Chris, I'm a marriage counselor, I teach marriage counseling at, it turned out it was a mid-major at Southern University, and we've been in marriage counseling for 20 years. And honestly, this assessment was like getting 20 years of marriage counseling in a box, because you not only have pinpointed something that we haven't been able to see in 20 years of marriage counseling, but you've told us how to solve it. And I was like, I knew the value of it for myself because I had seen it
Sure.
predict exactly what was happening in my marriage. And anyway, I asked the wife, and she said it's profoundly accurate. And at the time, I thought, well, okay, well, who knows if it'll help couples, really, right? People have been fighting for 20 years. Can that help them? So I kind of kept in touch. One thing and another. 6 months later, I had a conversation with the wife, and she said, this was really truly profoundly helpful. We are no longer fighting the way we did. Now that we can see the trigger, we can prevent the argument, and it was just a profoundly helpful moment for our relationship. So that's actually how my like foundational story for why I do what I do. I knew at the time that was my very first married couple, and I knew I needed to have about 200 200 between my business and my marriage work. I needed to do 200 Berkman assessments to really get my arms fully around personality and be able to put together a program to help people. And that's basically what I've done since, somewhere around 300 Berkman assessments, and just, thousands of conversations with people about why they fight, why they fall out, the kinds of things that divide them, always using Berkman information as the foundation of it.
All right, Chris, stand by. We'll be back on the other side of this short break. And Exonation, our guest this hour is the couples whisperer. I've heard of the horse whisperer, the dog whisperer, and now here on the X-Zone we have the couples whisperer. Chris SHAVER is his name, and his website is marriagecure.com. And Chris and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. You've got a marriage counselor that goes to see Chris, and this guy teaches marriage counseling at a university. I hope he changed professions after he saw you, Chris.
Well, I think the thing is about marriage counseling, Rob, is that marriage counselors are all about behavior. They do understand behavior. They just don't understand it with the depth that Berkman did, because Berkman did the research on it. And by virtue of having an assessment that can pinpoint these things, the biggest weakness in the marriage counseling model is that you have to fight in front of somebody and hope they pick up the drivers of your conflict. one of the truly interesting things when I was going through the misery of my 10 years of fighting with my wife was, I mean, I literally bought 100 books, textbooks, everything. And the best ones, the ones who were, written by the most credible authors,
Mhm.
all in the very beginning said that the real drivers of all conflict are unmet needs. And the bizarre thing about every one of those books was they never mentioned what those needs might be again. So, I mean, believe me, I was one frustrated human being because
I would
I
imagine so, yeah.
couldn't figure out my own marriage. Well, Berkman measures your usual behaviors. Berkman measures your needs for behavior from your spouse or partner. So when I saw that, I was like, well, here's a light bulb that just went off. This is what everyone's talking about, but nobody ever delivers on. And it turns out that's where the devil occurs in most relationships because there's um, a complex structure, but there's 9 pairs of opposite behaviors that we all are one side or the other. And so you might be very direct in your communication, but you might need your spouse or partner to be indirect. That need is where if that need is not met, there will be conflict. And in Berkman, if there's a 30-point gap, it measures on a 0 to 9 scale. So there's a 30-point gap between your behavior and my need, there will be conflict. The bigger the gap, the more likelihood and usually the more intense the conflict is. But being able to discuss these very specific behaviors with couples and just say, hey guys, I mean, you can't get out alive. Everyone's in the midst of these, it's very binary world. Like, I want it this way, you're giving it to me that way. Can you soften it up a little bit? That becomes a conversation. Berkman pinpoints it. And a marriage counselor, you got to fight in front of them. And they honestly don't know the needs. From the literature that I've read, they're kind of tuned into 3 out of the 9, but there are other drivers besides that they really don't have a language and a specific way of getting to it quickly. So, I mean, you could fight in front of a marriage counselor. These people have been fighting in front of a marriage counselor for 20 years. I'm not saying it's typical, but because they had something pretty subtle that Berkman found. But that's the problem with marriage counseling. Great at helping you once they know what's
Mhm.
driving the conflict, not that great at discovering the conflict.
Chris, how can you avoid the biggest mistake you can make with your spouse?
Well, what we're talking about, right? It's not understanding. I had a client um, married for 26 years, and this couple would have drinks when they came home at night,
Mm.
just unwind while one of the other one made dinner. They would trade off, and he said to me, um, this was the initial conversation. He said, like once a week for the past 26 years, I'll say something. I never know what it is that triggers her. She goes up to her bedroom, locks the door, and doesn't come out till the next morning. So it's these needs, and because they're not, Rob, here's the real problem: is that when our needs aren't met, that what that woman did, what his wife did, which was leave the room, run away. That's what Berkman would call a stress behavior. And I call it, and Berkman says charitably, it's your least effective behavior. I call it your kindergarten behavior. And because none of us have been, um, most of us haven't had a Berkman assessment. Most of us are unfamiliar with our needs. We're familiar with that stinging feeling when something lands rough or the wrong way. And then our behavior quickly morphs into this kindergarten childlike behavior. It could be running away, it could be yelling like my wife and I did with each other, but it's very childish, childlike behavior. And the childlike behavior in our minds signifies that we're communicating clearly to our spouse or partner, like, oh, you shouldn't do that with me. But really those childish behaviors just get misinterpreted, and you throw them right back at whoever's giving it to them. You give it right back to them, and you're like, who do you think you are? It's like, you run away from me, I'll get out the door, I'll go to the bar and I won't come back. So now you haven't gotten any closer to understanding what the need was that wasn't met, because now you're in this endless loop of childish behavior. So the biggest mistakes you can make are these 9, not understanding these 9 behavioral needs that your spouse or partner has. And the report that I pull, I've got a product that I sell that it's a video-based course. You would take the assessment, but it really pinpoints your most intense needs. Berkman measures the intensity of the need. So if you need, I'm just curious, like do you need people to talk to you very directly, just give it to you straight, or do you prefer people come at you a little softer, respect the relationship, maybe even be a little indirect when they're talking to you? Is that something you're aware of that you could answer that question?
Well, yeah, I don't mind answering your questions. My background is in law enforcement. Okay, before I got into radio, and I've been used to people talking to me every single way that you can imagine. So
Right.
it really doesn't affect me either way.
Well, but let me say it to you this way, because
Sure.
this is one of the general big mistakes that a lot of couples make, is that
Mhm.
what we expect from our spouse or partner, the person closest,
Yeah.
we have a different rule set, and we measure them by a different standard. So, a drunk on the street saying, "Hey, whatever, get over here, I got something
Yeah.
to say to you," is different than your wife or your partner saying, um, you know, "Give me the glass, hand me that glass right now." And that could
Sure.
just be, it could be because, whatever, somebody's throwing up and they need a drink of water. But people can take offense to too direct, or the flip side can occur where people can say, "You don't trust me enough to tell me right out? Like, what are you tap dancing around about?" That can be
Well,
not.
well, once again, my wife and I have been married. Oh, let's see, we've got 6 growing up kids. One of our children is turning 50. We've got 15 grandchildren, and we've never been to marriage counselor once.
Well,
We've
but,
always
but,
had this
but I'm
we've always
asking you,
had this understanding. She's a professional nurse, I'm a professional law enforcement officer. We've always understood each other.
I think it's probably likely given those two careers, because personalities follow certain careers, but you're
Mhm.
probably fairly straight with each other. You just tell it to you.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and you like it when somebody's straight with you.
All the time.
So now imagine that your wife all of a sudden started tap dancing around an issue with you, an important issue, maybe your kids or something, and she won't come out straight and tell you. What would that make you feel like?
I don't know, it's never happened.
Well, so this is the thing. You're well matched, you're well suited. So around that issue, what the feeling that happens when somebody has that need to give it to me straight
Mhm.
is actually, it's the identical sense of feeling disrespected, that it can be the other way around. If you're with somebody who needs you to sort of like approach them softly and hint at a subject, and you hit them too straight, you're too blunt, it can feel like, well, I'm disrespected. But with what sounds like your need is, just give it to me straight. I can deal with it. We'll keep it just the facts. Just keep moving. But if somebody would tap dance around, you would eventually say, like, what is going on with you? Don't you trust me enough? Like, so that the same sense of disrespect could happen.
Well, I don't
So,
think trust has ever been an issue. In fact, I know it's never been an issue, whether it's my wife, whether it's my children, whether it's my grandchildren. We've
so
always had a very honest relationship with each other.
honest and straightforward. So the challenge becomes when your behavior doesn't match my need.
Mhm.
And those are the biggest mistakes. And because needs are not explicitly stated, and needs can also be situational and conditional. Like in my first marriage, my wife would say to me, "If my sister's in the room, you can say this to me, but if my sister's in the room with my mother, you can't say that to me. But
Wow.
if my two sisters are in the room with my mother, you could say that to me." So people are complicated.
Yeah,
You should be happy for your marriage.
I am. Believe me, I am. Chris, you and I have to take another break. Please stand by. And Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Chris Shaver. He is the couples whisperer. And Chris has a new book coming out. We're going to be talking about that, called Marriage Cure, the Proven Way to Restore Your Love. Your love. Wow. Having a hard time with that one, Chris. Let me try that again. Marriage Cure, the Proven Way to Restore Your Love. And his website is, got your pencils and paper ready? Here we go. Marriagecure.com. And Chris and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Exonation, Chris Shaver is our special guest. He is the Couples Whisperer. His website is marriagecure.com. Chris, I would imagine one of the biggest causes of a fight between a husband and wife is money. Is there a secret to avoid fighting over money when it comes to a married couple?
I think the secret, Rob, is to learn how to have a disagreement without fighting at all. And this goes to the 9 pairs of opposite behaviors I've been talking to you about. But the money is a decision, right? How we'll spend our money is the decision that's usually being argued about. And the real place that the rubber hits the road is in the behavior of a couple. So when you're looking at making decisions, you've got 2 kinds of people. You have people who like to have calm, easygoing conversations, and those kinds of people, if their need is that they like personal autonomy. In other words, I get to make choices, you get to make choices. Maybe our choices are different. The flip side of that scale is highly assertive behavior, where people like to know when they have the need, they want to know that they're in charge. So often, I mean, if you're looking at just this opposite set, where the people who like personal autonomy and like easygoing decision making, if you jam that person, first of all, stubborn won't be the word. It'll be like you can't move that person in a decision. Now, if you jam somebody who has the need to be in charge, they're going to get loud and overly aggressive with you. So the first thing I'd tell couples is, if you don't get a handle on the behaviors that you have as a couple that are, your behavior is your behavior, your need is your need. If you don't understand the underlying need, you're going to fight about anything. It's not just going to be money. Money is just the most intense decision that you have to make as a couple, right? If you don't have enough money to make a house payment and somebody wants to buy a boat, that's going to be an intense conversation.
Sure will, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the intensity of it that differs, and that's why couples fight more about money than anything else. But the underlying reason that they're fighting is a failure to understand the need and each other's needs, and then a failure to have a negotiating strategy put in place so that both of those needs, one way or the other, are going to get met. And that's where it can get a little tricky there. It can get complex, but the core of it is understanding the behaviors that are going to drive a fight per se. So, I mean, and the combinations are, you can have 2 people who both want autonomy. You can have 2 people who both want to be in charge, or it can be, so there's really 3 combinations. So the strategies that I would teach a couple would be dependent upon, those one of 3 need sets. But if you don't get a handle on how you're going to make decisions in stressful situations, that's where conflict occurs. Fights, right? Not just because you can differ. I want this car, you want that boat. You can differ, but will you fight is the question.
You know, you were talking about triggers in the segment before. Are these triggers developed, or have these triggers always been there? And do couples intentionally pull the triggers in order to get some sort of gain on the other person? Or is this all done subconsciously that they don't know that they're actually triggering the other person?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, good.
Right? Because have they been there all along? As soon as I saw my own Berkman,
Mhm.
honestly, I went through like every conflict situation in my life to try and use it as a diagnostic tool. And I could go back as early as I have a memory of at 5 years of age, where I had a conflict with my father, where that need was clear and present for me, and my father violated that need, and I was furious with him. So in some cases, and if you have kids, once you realize what these are, I sort of looked at my kids, and since then I've had my kids all take Berkman assessments. And in some cases, you come out of the womb, I swear to you, with these things sort of like intact, and you don't change. And some of them get changed along the way. Now, do couples use them as triggers? When you get like my wife and I, who got in this 10 years of being able to fight, um, were we doing it intentionally? Yeah. Did we know what we were doing? Not really, but we were
Okay.
doing it intentionally. It becomes a pattern. So you do know that you do kind of tend to know. Um, I think a lot of times you know what's going to land rough with your spouse. You might not have the language to say it. You might not, you could just be like, oh, if I do this, I get that reaction. So I do think couples, when they get really, I call that the spiral of marriage decay, where you're just deliberately hurting each other.
Mhm.
But I also see some very practiced, kind of like unconscious dances. Couples don't know they're doing it, but they keep doing it. Yeah.
So is a trigger a need then?
Well, the trigger triggers the need, right? My need
Mhm.
is, in your case, my
Right,
need is talk to me directly.
right,
So if somebody tiptoes around it, like that's a trigger. It's like, whoa, what's going on? Like, come on, just give it to me straight.
right.
Right. So the trigger is like you're tap dancing, and so trigger actually becomes it's like conditioned response. Like if it happens too many times, instead of being like, having that moment where you say like, what's going on? Why are you doing that? You're like, again, again, again with that, like
Yeah.
stop already. Right. So it just becomes like somebody who's, it's a flinch almost when something actually rises to that level of trigger.
So can you ever be your authentic self in love or relationships? Like, I mean, really yourself?
I I think the answer is yes, but you have to know who yourself is before
Mm.
you can start to express that, and even so often make room for it. Because it is one of those things that I see with couples is if somebody has like a very clear need, let's say you have this very clear need for direct communication. I'm just sticking with
Yeah.
that one, so I don't have to explain the depth of this. And your spouse was used to being indirect. Well, eventually you train them towards that. um, that might not be who they are. They might always be very uncomfortable doing that. So once you bring these things up to the surface, you have the opportunity. It's as simple as saying, like, in this situation, do you mind if I don't do that? Because it's uncomfortable to me. So all of a sudden, this tension that might be like, I'm on pins and needles around him because I might get it the wrong way. All of a sudden, it becomes like a conversation you can have. And even if you say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just used to talking to my boss at work that way, or my girlfriends all talk that way. I didn't mean it." So it just becomes like this relief to be able to say who you are naturally. And Berkman measures these 9 behaviors, 9 needs, and your 9 stress behaviors. Berkman also measures 10 interests. And your strong interests are really, when you're talking about being your authentic self, um, when you have a strong interest, that's the kind of thing that I always say, like, my strong interests are why I'm here on this planet. If I'm a writer, if I can wake up and spend the day writing, that's a joyful day for me. So, and if I was in a relationship where I didn't have the ability to do that, or every time I sat down, my spouse was nagging at me to go up and do something, like I wouldn't be able to be that's what I feel like is my authentic self, that part of me that wants to self-express around my interests. So having all these things gives, in black and white before both of you, gives you the ability to say, I'm not just making this up. It's like, here it
Right.
is in black and white. I have this like a 97% interest here that, it's who I am. Love me or hate me, it's who I am. So it facilitates these conversations where you become self-aware enough to know who you are, who your partner is. It's self-aware and others aware. And then this ability to have a relationship where you facilitate that and allow it for both of you.
You keep on talking about the Birkman. What is the Birkman? Is it a consultancy group? Is it a psychological profile? What exactly is it?
Roger Birkman was a PhD psychologist, yeah, professor at the University of Texas, 1948. After the war, he came back from the war. He'd been a pilot of a bomber, and they would debrief after these missions. And in this little tin can of a plane, and 9 guys in a plane would all have 100% different point of view of everything that happened on a bombing mission. And he came back with this idea to be able to, and he saw that perception equals reality, right? So the guy in the gunner bay in the back is seeing the world through a whole different lens, and it doesn't really even have to do with the little window he's looking out on the world. It's the window of his own perceptions. So Berkman wanted to do and did do empirical research on perceptions, which turn out to drive the truth of us in a relationship. So, and what he found in doing empirical research with people who had worked successfully together for 10 years or more, he teased out these 10 behaviors, 10 needs for behaviors from your spouse or partner, the stress behaviors and these interests. And then he went away and did this sort of genius act of creating an assessment so you could sit down online, take an assessment, and in a half an hour get what my first married clients called 20 years of marriage counseling or therapy in a box. You get this tremendous level of self-awareness. So he made a company called Birkman International, and then went out and took that to the world. It's been primarily this Birkman method. The assessment and the reports have been primarily used in business settings, but Roger Birkman also took it into Methodist churches in Texas during his lifetime, and that's sort of interpreting the results. Kind of read in businessese, and I interpret them for couples. So it's an interpretive act of this assessment to help couples, and couple speak in everyday situations, understand how these behaviors and needs apply to them.
Stand by. We've got to take our final break, Chris. And XO Nation, if you'd like to contact Chris and see how he can help you, the website is marriagecure.com. He's the couples whisperer. Another first here on the X Zone. We'll be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. And we're back with Chris Shaver. Chris, what are the 3 warning signs that your marriage may be on the rocks? I mean, besides the fact that you get home and everything you own is out on the driveway, your credit cards are maxed, and your dog bites you.
Yeah, that's the biggest warning sign of all.
Which one, the dog biting you?
I think everything on the lawn. Everything on the lawn. That one. If you haven't been able to figure out the signals before then, that's the last one. But actually, Rob, the biggest warning sign that I can tell you is waiting, and because the research shows that couples wait 6 years after they know they have a problem in their relationship to seek help.
Wow.
And so that's that sense that something's wrong, but I'm going to hang in there. Maybe it'll get better, maybe it won't. But and so it's almost invisible. It's that you're waiting. You've got a problem, but you're waiting. That's kind of number one. Um, I would say case building is number two, because frequently, I mean, I do a free consult for people before we start working together, and then the thing that I use to weed people out is that if a lot of people will want to go to a marriage counselor looking for a judge and a jury. In other words, I've got this amazing case against this person who's annoying me, and I need somebody else to validate that they are in fact wrong. So, and it's sort of like the third warning sign is a part of that, which is you want to win. You don't want to fix. You don't want to restore love. You're looking to win. Um, and the classic, the end is at hand, really, is disdain, but that's beyond a warning sign. That means your marriage is over if disdain is present. But I would say it's waiting and case building, that sense that I'm going to write this down because no one would ever believe it, instead of opening up curiosity and seeking help and advice. You're just busy building a case against the other person.
What about that good old silent treatment? Does that really work, Chris?
Well, silent treatment is another one of those childlike behaviors that occur that signify that a need has been violated, not met. And so I think the most interesting thing to me about talking with couples and sort of witnessing that in my own marriage and the couples I've worked with for the past 10 years is that couples actually think that they're communicating clearly when they do things like giving the silent treatment or yelling at somebody or passive aggressiveness or just like the cold freeze out. People are convinced that they are giving very clear signals that their partner can or spouse can identify with. And the truth is, those are relationship destructive behaviors, every last one of them. And when people receive that, they don't receive that with any level of your good intent to train them to to some other behavior. They just they break down and they destroy relationships.
Here's an interesting question that you sent us. How can you avoid the 3 fights in every relationship?
Well, first, I think it's important to identify what they are, but I would say the first one is a respect fight, and that's what we've been talking about here throughout the hour. Respect fights, respect is received in one-to-one communication, whether it's you're meeting my need to give it to me just the facts, straight ahead, or coming at me more softly. The second one we were talking about has been a decision-making fight. It's classic. It's power and control. And the third one is usually an energy fight. Not enough energy to do something, or your energy shot, or your energies are different. But honestly, the way that you avoid any of these things is, number one, understand that you have needs, and your needs, and when you get triggered or when something lands rough or when something's not working, underneath it all, you do have needs. You have behavioral needs. You have needs to be treated in specific ways. If you don't understand that, then working with someone like me who can give you an assessment and create this language of needs, because unmet needs drive all conflict in relationships. And so if you're looking to avoid, I mean, even sexual energy, Berkman doesn't measure sexual energy, but it's a classic thing where there's an imbalance. Somebody wants sex 4 times a week, somebody wants it once a month. I mean, that's an imbalance of energy that you can have fights around things like that. Social energy, emotional energy. You want to talk just the facts. I want to talk about my feelings. All of
Right.
these things. Yeah. So all of these are classic marriage conflicts. And if you don't get a shared language understanding of how to manage somebody whose needs don't match your behavior, or how to trade off so needs get met in some sort of sustainable way, people will feel misunderstood, and marriages will fall out around those misunderstandings.
But
So
doesn't all this depend on both parties wanting to participate? Like I've got friends who want to go to a marriage counselor. He wants to go, she doesn't want to go. In another case, she doesn't want to go, he wants to go. So what happens when you have one who wants the help and the other doesn't?
marriages fail. It's usually an
Yeah.
indicator, right? It's an indicator that I'm sort of done with you. I'm hanging in for whatever reason. But it's part of the reason I screen calls. I do a free call. You can, book my services on marriagecure.com, but the conversation will go like, are you both all in? Because if you're not both open and curious, if you're sitting there in judgment, if you're not interested in the accurate nature of both your perceptions, both your needs, why you're doing it, and you really don't want to leverage your time and do something, and
Yeah.
get in there, your marriage will end. But those are clear indicators for people that it might be time to move on.
What degree of a factor would children in the marriage play in the entire reconstruction of a marriage, if there is one?
Well, I've had experience with a couple who was this far away from divorce, and the only reason they were staying in that marriage was for their kids. So sometimes those children can be the reason both people will hang in there. Um, Sometimes part of the reason this couple was that close to leaving was they were both screaming at each other, and their children were starting to model their behavior, and it was freaking them out that they were passing this on
Yeah.
to their kids. But the truth is, the research does show that it's kind of the sins of the parents are visited on the heads of the children for 7 generations. I'm a child of parents who should have been divorced. They were living in the same house but not together. And I can tell you that the strange crap that you inherit from your parents gets passed on, and my inability to navigate even the hardest parts of my marriage, really I really was reflecting my parents' own incompetence at the same. So if you don't want to pass these things on to your kids, and your grandchildren, there's a way. There is a way. And the beauty of my program, the Marriage Cure, is that we go immediately to pinpointing those missing pieces, the reasons that you're fighting. You don't have to fight in front of me. And then we'll go immediately from there to the prescribed behaviors. Here's what it is. If you're two adults and you can navigate the space, here's the prescribed behaviors. I have a need-based negotiating techniques that I call adults. That is, acknowledge your needs, declare them, understand what they are, launch new behaviors, try them out, and
Mhm.
settle your differences peacefully. It's a very simple technique once you understand your needs. But until those needs are out in the open, you get a lot of people who look exactly like 5-year-olds going at it. Go to your room until you figure it out. Meanwhile, you go in there and the kids are choking each other.
Hey, Chris, you and I have to say so long for tonight. I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. Great pleasure talking to you. And keep it out there, my friend. And I love the title. You are the couple's whisperer. So thanks very much for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Rob. My pleasure. It's really been enjoying.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye now. And if you would like to contact our good friend, Chris Shaver, his website is marriagecure.com. That's it for tonight, Exonation. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And we're here Monday through Friday, starting at 10 p.m. Eastern. So until tomorrow night, from my senior executive producer, my lovely wife and best friend in the world, Laura Rogers, over there at Master Control, Craig West. Thanks, Craig. Always working with you, pal. It's a pleasure. And, of course, my Director of International Programming, Mac Alexander. And to you, my friends, each and every one of you, thank you for joining us and being part of what we do here every night, trying to touch one life, one heart, making a positive difference in the world. And as I say at the end of every night, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.